What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. Joining me on today's episode, Jimmy Watkins, cleveland.com's columnist, and Chris Fedor could not make it today because he's on his way to Summer League in Las Vegas. Jimmy, there's so much going on around the league. We've talked about the summer moves that have been happening around the NBA, free agency, trades, and all of the good stuff that comes with it. And now we're going to get the opportunity to watch some basketball. Yes, it is Summer League, but yes, I'm still excited for the season to be coming around the corner. That's what Summer League indicates to me. But as I mentioned, there have been moves around the margins that have helped these teams. Obviously, the NBA draft can help with that. But I wanted to break down some of the teams that could pose the biggest threat to the Cleveland Cavaliers as we're almost midway through the summer and trying to figure out what free agency and trades have done for the teams around the Eastern Conference. Let's go with the top six. I'm going to let you start. Who do you have as the sixth best team in the Eastern Conference when it comes to challenging the Cleveland Cavaliers and preventing them from reaching the NBA Finals?
Kind of flip a coin between the Bucks and Pistons here. I think the Pistons are deeper than the Bucks. I don't think that either of these teams are particularly have the Cavs quaking in their shoes at this point. But you have to respect Giannis in any playoff series. A front line of Miles Turner and Giannis is defensively a formidable combination. Miles Turner's not quite the all-world rim protector he was maybe in his mid-20s, but he's still pretty good there, and Giannis is Giannis. And pairing Giannis with a stretch big, we have lots and lots of data on that from his time with Brook Lopez that really works enough. I just don't know who's dribbling the ball for that team for most of the year and in playoff series. The Bucks basically brought their entire team back besides Dame and Brook Lopez, maybe Pat Connaughton too, and didn't replace Dame really, just replaced Brook Lopez with Miles Turner, which I think is a marginal up to marginal plus upgrade, and said, okay, Giannis, let's go win a championship with this or compete for a championship with this. I just have to think there's another move coming from them. I'm looking at the Kuzma contract, 22-ish million. I'm looking at a 2032 first round pick. I think the Nuggets are the only team that have traded a pick out that far to this point. But if you're trying to retain Giannis, I'd say it's all hands on deck. I guess I would go regular season. I think it's Pistons, Bucks in that order. Be 5-6. But I think in a playoff season, it's Giannis. So I'll go Bucks, Pistons. Again, not sure either of these teams are legitimate threats.
So, Jimmy, I actually have the Detroit Pistons as my number 6 team on this list, and I've gone into the different analytics when it comes to these teams that have already posed different issues to the Cavs, obviously, in recent years in Detroit, and taking into the notion of, obviously, the regular season and the playoffs. I just don't think that the Detroit Pistons have the experience yet of playoff performances. Obviously, they had a great series against the New York Knicks, but I think the New York Knicks don't pose the same kinds of problems that the Cleveland Cavaliers would for the Detroit Pistons in a 7-game series. With that said, I do want to go into a little bit of their depth chart, which I found very interesting with the moves that they've made. Obviously, they have Cade Cunningham running the points as their all-star guard. Jaden Ivey is set to return after missing a majority of last season. Asar Thompson, they're looking for him to have more of a facilitating role to help Cade Cunningham get off the ball a little bit more coming into this next season. Tobias Harris, Jalen Duren, and then obviously they also went and got Karis LeVert and Duncan Robinson, 2 offseason acquisitions that I feel like work alongside the necessary shooting that they lost or could be losing with Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. and Duncan Robinson, and also the ball handling and facilitation that we talked about in Karis LeVert. They also got Marcus Sasser, Ronald Holland II, and Isaiah Stewart, of course, and Paul Reed on that back line as well. So I think they have different pieces that are still working to find out how they mesh together. Their starting lineup has been together for a decent minute. It's about reacclimating Jaden Ivey, figuring out what his role is going to be on this team, how productive he's going to be able to be in the year coming back from injury. But Jimmy, you mentioned your number 5 pick, and I actually don't have Milwaukee as my number 5 pick. I have the Philadelphia 76ers as my number 5 pick, and seeing how they have a lot of different players coming back from injury this coming season. Tyrese Maxey should be healthy. Joel Embiid, who knows, should be healthy. Paul George should also be healthy. And then we talk about their potential rookie of the year who was playing out of his mind to start the season in Jared McCain. Also, let me mention that they went and drafted someone that I'm extremely high on out of the NBA draft in VJ, who comes from Baylor, a 6'5", 180. You can call him a wing, you can call him a guard. I see him as a guy who's hungry and wants to win at the highest level. He's the guy who had one of the most inspirational and emotional stories on draft night that I think hits hard for a lot of different people who want to see just players of this caliber win. Also, they still have on their roster Kelly Oubre Jr., Justin Edwards, and Andre Drummond at this point. So I think it's going to be interesting, along with Quentin Grimes, how this 76ers offense runs if they can maintain their health. Jimmy, what do you think about the 76ers? And did you have them on your list, or were they a forgotten cause for you?
I just don't trust anyone on this team that matters in the playoffs to stay healthy. I think Joel Embiid is the needle mover for this franchise. Paul George at this stage, even if Paul George is healthy, I'm not sure what version of him getting at this stage of his career. And again, I'm thinking more playoff threat than regular season threat. I think there's a world where the Pacers can get a top 6, top 5 seed. I don't think there's a world where Joel Embiid, I'm at the point where I need to see Joel Embiid play 50 games in a row before I'm going to believe it happens again. Paul George season last year was very concerning, and what's left over is an intriguing group of young players, but I'm not sure that Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, and VJ Edgecombe, I don't know where that's taken me, particularly not next year. Yeah, I'm high on all 3 of those guys individually, but how they mesh together is a question. Jared McCain was so impressive last year, but for such a brief flash, we don't know how he's going to come back. How do you incorporate VJ Edgecombe? Can you play those 3 at the same time against certain teams, certain lineups? Maybe, but in playoff settings, I have my questions. I just have too much unknown going on. The best version of the Sixers, the pie in the sky version of the Sixers, sure, man. Like, I could see it, but the other thing is, I can't see them being the best version of themselves because it's not a fun thing to talk about. But I just don't trust them to stay healthy at all.
All right, Jimmy, moving on to your number 4 pick. Who is the 4th best team to challenge the Cleveland Cavaliers in the overall scheme of the NBA?
So I think I'll probably surprise some people with this one. I'm lower on the Hawks than it sounds like. Consensus tends to be they're number 4 for me. We'll talk about who I have ahead of them. I was just doing some quick research before we got on the pod here. This is not the same roster they've had, and there have been extenuating circumstances in some of these cases. I get it. But since Trae Young got to Atlanta, the Hawks have never won 50 games. Their best season was a 41-31 COVID-shortened campaign that the year they made the conference finals run. I think it was the second year of the weird COVID shortage. They were on a 47 win pace that year, which is great. And they had a great year that year. But I think we all understand there's a lot of weird stuff happening during that time. And we're taking some of those results with a grain of salt. They've also only had a winning record twice in 7 years since Trae Young got there. This will probably be the 3rd time that they have a winning record. This is their best chance to win 50 games. This looks like the strongest roster that they've had around Trae Young. And I like the Nickeil Alexander-Walker addition as, someone who could take some perimeter defensive pressure off Trae. Teams are still going to hunt the crap out of him in the playoffs. It's an unavoidable, but yeah, I like that. I like the idea of Kristaps Porzingis next to Trae Young, a pick and pop big who can defend on the perimeter, defend the rim. I mean, they've called him the unicorn for a reason. Do we just forget that Kristaps Porzingis had a weird respiratory illness for like the last 4 months of the season? I've heard that he could be playing in, I don't know if it's Eurobasket this summer, but playing overseas with his national team. That's great. That's encouraging to hear. I want to see how he looks. That's another guy that, the next time he stays healthy for an entire season will be the first time I believe it. And Jalen Johnson. I love Jalen Johnson. I think Jalen Johnson could be this all-star wing that Trey has needed for his entire career. He has played more than 56 games once in 4 years. So again, it's a damper. It's not a fun basketball thing to talk about. The Hawks certainly have the kind of wing depth that could give the Cavs and has given the Cavs problems in the past. They've got good positional size. I like that their ability, like if the Cavs want to try to bully ball them with two bigs, Onyeka Okongwu and Kristaps Porzingis, again, assuming they're both there, that's a nice pairing right there. I think the Hawks have done a nice job. But I do like this unprotected pick that they got, even the kid from, I think it's Issa Newell, the kid they got from Georgia in the draft. I like him. I don't know if he's going to be ready next year to contribute at a playoff level, but I like him. I'm just not there yet on the Hawks. And I also think that they made a great trade on draft night to get this unprotected Pelicans pick that I think is actually they can choose between the Pelicans and the Bucks pick next year, both of which could be in flux given what happens this season. That's awesome, but it's next year. And unless they try to make a move with it this year, which I would recommend not doing. I think they should hang on to that pick. I'm just not quite there on the Hawks, but I do acknowledge that they've put themselves in a higher tier with all the moves that they've made.
My number 4 pick is the Milwaukee Bucks. I have them here because of Giannis, right? We had this conversation when Jimmy went into his reasoning. I don't think they have a true ball handler on this team, right? But if you can space the floor and have Giannis bring the ball up, I think that's a scary thing to look at, right? Their depth chart, when healthy, Kevin Porter Jr., Gary Trent Jr., Kyle Kuzma, obviously Giannis at the 4, and Miles Turner at the 5. You also still have AJ Green and Taurean Prince and Bobby Portis, and now you have the acquisition of Gary Harris and Jericho Sims. I think these are all players that have experience that could help the Bucks. It's just about who is going to bring the ball up. It's kind of a similar conversation to what we were talking about with the Orlando Magic last year. Like outside of Jalen Suggs, who are you giving the ball to, right? Are you allowing Paolo to bring the ball up and all these things? We'll get to that a little bit later. But I think Giannis obviously drives that ship, and he's a guy that nobody can count out because he's probably top 3 best players in the NBA still. And I just think there's so much that he can do that makes things difficult for the Cavs, that having shooters around him now, which is kind of what has been elevated, as you mentioned, Jimmy, Miles Turner, but also Kevin Porter Jr., AJ Green, Kyle Kuzma, Taurean Prince, the ability for him to drive and kick now rather than driving and just having be stuck in the painted area is so much more fluid. There's so many more options than he's had in years past, even with having Damian Lillard on his team, because we know they didn't utilize that as well as they could have. Okay, Jimmy, give me your number 3, because I was shocked a little bit that you had Atlanta so low. So I'm curious to see how your list rounds out.
I got Boston. I just don't think they're dead. I don't think Boston's dead. I think that the core they have in place, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, now Anthony Simons, Peyton Pritchard, it's lesser. It's still interesting to me. And they're going to be a little thinner on depth. I don't like their center rotation is kind of a head scratcher to me. We're looking at, I forget his first name, but Keita. They signed Luka Garza in the offseason, who wasn't really playing in Minnesota, letting Luke Cornett, Al Horford, and Kristaps Porzingis walk out the door. That was interesting to me. But I do think there's a world, again, Jaylen Brown's been relatively healthy most of his career. Anthony Simons can replace some of the scoring punch. Obviously, they lose a ton without having Jason Tatum. Having 2 elite wings is their biggest advantage. Now they only have 1. Anthony Simons, but as an 82-game player, I like Anthony Simons. Derek White can cover some of his defensive deficiencies. I'll be interested. Their defense probably will slip a little bit. They'll probably have to play a little bit differently. They won't be able to switch as much. There'll be more areas to pick on. But I see a scenario, I see two scenarios here. One, I could see Boston just Bostoning through the East, notching enough regular season wins to keep themselves in the top half of this conference. And then maybe looking up and deciding at the deadline, like, who knows? Like, what if there's an injury at the top of another injury at the top of the East next year, or one of these teams that we think is going to be a contender next year it doesn't come to fruition for them. What if they look around and they're like, you know what, we could still add to this team. They just gained a bunch of flexibility by getting rid of Drew and Kristaps Porzingis. And again, this is as much a commentary on the rest of the East, how little I think of it, as I do my trust in the Celtics. Not saying, just saying. The Celtics have not ruled out a Jason Tatum return at some point next season. Brad Stevens said that there's no expectation on a timetable for him, but they're not ruling out a return. The Pacers, on the other hand, who advanced 2 rounds further, makes sense, did rule out Tyrese Halliburton earlier this week for the rest of next season. So again, we're talking about, I'm thinking playoffs. If we reach a point where the Celtics somehow mess around and end up in the conference finals, which given the increased flexibility they have now, given what I think of some of these other teams, and even how flimsy, like, all these teams that we think are like pseudo contenders now, they're an injury away from not being pseudo contenders anymore. Weird stuff, as we're learning, can happen. And if Jason Tatum comes back for the conference finals and the Cavs are looking at a semi-stock Boston team, I don't want that. I don't want that if I'm the Cavs.
For everybody listening, and to clarify, these lists that we have constructed, these rankings, are in mind with everyone that doesn't have a current debilitating injury on their team being healthy, right? That's why the Philadelphia 76ers made my list. I do not have Boston in my top 6. The reason being is their current situation. This is, again, we are recording this at 7 p.m. on July 9th. So this is based on everything we know about free agency, about trades, about the current construction of these teams' rosters, about the health of these teams' rosters currently. Things change. And as Jimmy said, things could and will happen to change our minds throughout the season. Again, this is summertime podcasting. We're trying to give you as much information as we possibly can. Again, Boston is not in my top 6 because, as Jimmy mentioned, their front court depth is abysmal, right? You have the options for the Boston Celtics at any given time at the center position to play Luke Garza, Neemias Queta, Xavier Tillman, or George Niang.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, we could get some George Niang run. We could really get some George Niang run next year.
And by ESPN standard, on their depth chart breakdown, they have George Niang as the Boston Celtics' starting power forward. I'm sorry. I enjoyed our time with George in Cleveland. He was a great role player. He was a great person. But if the Cavs see Boston and George Niang in the starting lineup as currently constructed, it is food. Who is he guarding? DeAndre Hunter? No. Dean Wade? No. Those are the back ends of that. You're not guarding Evan Mobley. You're not guarding Jarrett Allen. Who is he guarding? There is a reason the Cavs went away from George Niang. As emotionally trying as it was, there was a reason they went away from George Niang. So I don't think Boston, as currently constructed, and I cannot emphasize that enough, is making it to where they are going to contend with the Cleveland Cavaliers this coming season.
As currently constructed, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, Anthony Simons. I'm taking that top 3 over everyone except Cavs, Knicks, Orlando, and the theoretical version of Philadelphia that's healthy that doesn't exist. Maybe Giannis and the Giannis.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair, Jimmy, and I don't think you're missing on that one. I just don't know how those 3 are gonna pair together. One, you know how Jaylen Brown and Derek White are gonna be, but also Jaylen Brown's coming back from arthroscopic knee surgery. We saw it with Evan Mobley. Sure, Evan Mobley has something in his DNA that allows him to heal faster and better than almost anybody we've covered. But I don't know how that's going to affect Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown has dealt with injuries throughout his career that he's had to come back from all these things. Also, how is Anthony Simons going to plug into this after coming from Portland and being one of the biggest players over there? How are you going to come find your role and be a number 2, maybe even a number 3 option, depending on what role they give Derek White this coming season? But I understand why you would have put them up there. They're just not on my list. My number 3 for my list is the New York Knicks. And I'm a little bit lower on the New York Knicks when it comes to contending with the Cleveland Cavaliers, in part because the Cavs have the pieces to now back up what the New York Knicks have been so good at, right? It was the length, it was the physicality, it was the strength of OG Anunoby, of Karl Anthony Towns, of Jalen Brunson, and the clutch gene that they have, and the ability that Josh Hart has to just get rebounds over everybody, even though he's only 6'4", right? Now you throw in the fact that you added DeAndre Hunter to this mix. You also have guys that are going to come in and play a bigger role. You have Larry Nance Jr., you have Lonzo Ball, guys who can guard Jalen Brunson, right? I just think that the Cavs have more of what it takes to guard the New York Knicks than they do the other 2 teams on this list that I have. And even looking back to last year, the Cavs were not as bothered by some of the things that the New York Knicks were doing. And it's more so how the Cavs would react in a playoff environment that has them at the number 3 spot for me. Also, the fact that they do have multiple all-stars on that team, and Karl Anthony Towns, when he gets going and he isn't committing dumb fouls, is a hard guard for almost everybody in the league, maybe outside of Victor Wembanyama and Evan Mobley. And obviously, the Cavs are home to Evan Mobley. Jimmy, who's your number 2 on this list?
Give me the Orlando Magic. I love what Orlando did this offseason. Basically, you take the 47 win skeleton that they had 2 years ago. They were on pace to win about the same number of games last year with Jalen Suggs in the lineup. You subtract KCP, you subtract Cole Anthony, you subtract Gary Harris. Thank you for your contributions. Gary Harris, nice, and KCP, nice veteran mentorship. Cole Anthony, a nice spark plug bench guy in certain situations. I think Tyus Jones can be a closing lineup player for this team in certain moments. He can organize their offense in a way that it has desperately needed for a really long time. He's been one of, if not the best backup point guards in the league for a while now. He can shoot. Defensively, teams will go at him, but the Magic have a lot of strong defensive players to put around him to help shield him. If he's your only huntable guy in the court, then I think you're in pretty decent shape. I love Desmond Bane. We've talked a lot when they made the Desmond Bane trade about how good of a fit that is schematically, what he can do for their offense, how big of a jump he made as a ball handler and playmaker last year. Like, he can unglue some of that offense as well. And he fits their ethos. He fits their brawny physical style. He'll talk to you. I mean, I just think the Magic are, and then you factor in Paolo Banchero just got the Supermax rookie extension. Factor in, and I mean, that's the kind of guy that I trust to get better every year. Franz Wagner is the kind of guy that I trust to get better every year. Franz, please, if you're telling me Franz Wagner could figure out his jump shot, I might pick the freaking Orlando Magic to win the East next year. I don't trust it right now, but I think this team is dangerously close. This is a legit threat. There's a team that took the Caps to 7 games 2 years ago. They are much, much better than they were then, and the Caps I still have questions about how they're going to perform in a playoff series when they're met with adversity. So I think Orlando will be a regular season. We're assuming healthier. Jalen Suggs has not always been healthy. Paolo missed time last year. Franz missed time last year. They had a bad injury luck run last year. But I think if Orlando, assuming relative health, I think the Orlando Magic could be a regular season problem. next year, and I think they could do some real growing up in the playoffs.
Yeah, I have them as my number 2 in this ranking as well. Orlando Magic is comfortably the second most dangerous team when it comes to stopping the Cavs from getting to the NBA Finals. And I obviously have to touch on the front court depth, which is huge in these conversations. You have Paolo, you have Wendell Carter Jr., you have Goga, you have Jonathan Isaac, who was a guy who was so good defensively, sneaky good. He's kind of like the same build as Evan Mobley. He doesn't have the same defensive acumen, but like he was a problem against the Cavs 2 years ago to the point where they were starting Jonathan Isaac to try and deter what the Cavs were able to do offensively. And then, obviously, as you mentioned, the acquisition of Desmond Bane is huge, but also having the option for Jalen Suggs and Anthony Black to be there. I just think it's so important for you to get guys that can play defense, that can handle the ball. And Anthony Black is growing into his own as well as a guy off the bench. And as you mentioned, Tyus Jones, I've been high on Tyus Jones since he went to Duke University. He's a guy that limits turnovers to no end, and is a guy that makes sure that the offense runs smoothly. And I think you needed someone like that who can run the offense, who can slow things down, who can facilitate with the best of them in the league. And if need be, you can rest Jalen Suggs a little bit more because he doesn't have to bring up the ball. He doesn't have to do these things. And Desmond Bane, obviously, as we mentioned, is a huge acquisition. It's probably the biggest acquisition of the summer thus far because of his shooting acumen and what the Orlando Magic were lacking. And it was exactly that. So, Jimmy, I think you make a great point when it comes to Orlando being number 2. I agree with you. Now we get to the number 1 most dangerous team to play against the Cleveland Cavaliers. If this were to be the team that they were to face in the Eastern Conference Finals today, this is the team that I would be most worried about. Who do you got, Jimmy?
The New York Knicks. Go New York, go New York, go, for a couple reasons. One, I think they're the second most talented team in the Eastern Conference, behind the Cavs. As much as I love Orlando, I just saw the Knicks make the conference finals. I haven't seen Orlando do diddly squat in the playoffs quite yet. So I'm holding off, tempering my Orlando enthusiasm a little bit. I think we saw the vision for what the Knicks can be. We saw OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges raise their games in the playoffs. Mitchell Robinson became a playoff dude. The way he was defending on the perimeter and protecting the rim in short spurts. And of course, Cavs still have nightmares about Mitchell Robinson on the offensive glass. Josh Hart the same way. I'm not convinced. I know that we've seen in recent years better efforts from the Cavs and Knicks head-to-head in the regular season. I don't care. The Cavs are shown for 3 years in a row that they behave differently in the playoffs. We don't know how that matchup would look over the course of 7 games. I like the Mike Brown hire. I think Mike Brown will modernize the Knicks offense, modernize their approach to rotations, extend rotations, have their best players a little bit more ready for the playoffs, and is maybe a little bit more. I don't know what. I don't know how much. I know they don't. I was gonna say Mike Brown might have them a little bit more ready to play chess in the playoffs because he's been on, he's on the Steve Kerr staff for a while. But like Tibbs is a pretty good playoff, is a pretty good tactician defensively. I just think that Tibbs' voice is wearing a little thinner, so it could be just a new coach freshen up as well for the Knicks. And Jalen Brunson's the best, one of the best, if not the best, late fourth quarter players walking, and we see it every season. We see it every postseason. And again, I don't know how the Cavs react in those situations. So I'm going Knicks. Small side. If the next season starts to head a little sideways, they have moves. They have movable contracts, and movable contracts that people would want. So it's not this team doesn't have to be. If it goes sideways, they don't have to be stuck. Like Karl Anthony Towns, flawed as he may be, is a guy that I would think 20 teams would want. OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges for the right guy. Like if I'm thinking, if if Giannis were to request a trade from the Bucks at some point during the season, or the LeBron thing gets weird with the Lakers, and these teams are trying to thread a needle where the Bucks don't have their pick still, so they can't tank in trading for Giannis unless they trade him to get their picks back. And the Lakers obviously have Luka, so they can't get nothing for LeBron if that were to come to fruition. I think the Knicks would be in line with that. That's a small part of the calculus, but I wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and obviously the LeBron James aspect adds a different kind of wrinkle to everybody's math as of right now with what that situation is looking like, and obviously him dropping hints that if he could end his career, it's probably in two different places, and it's New York and Cleveland. So I do think that's an interesting one. I don't have New York lower because I think they're a lower team. I just don't think they have what these last two teams that I've discussed have to be able to slow down the Cavs as much. Obviously, you mentioned Mitchell Robinson. It's a great call. I just don't know how many minutes he's gonna get, especially if they're gonna go with the two big lineup or if they're gonna just have Cat run the 5-man and all these different things because they need to have OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges on the floor at the same time, whether or not that adds room for Josh Hart, and obviously Jalen Brunson needs to be on the floor. So I think there's a lot of balancing that they have to do, and Mike Brown has to figure out as well. My number one team, the team that Jimmy had a little bit lower on his list. Peace up, A-Town. Atlanta Hawks. I got them as my number one ranked team to give the Cavs a run for their money if they were to run into them in the Eastern Conference Finals today. Atlanta, a team ran by one of the most clutch players in Trae Young, who has a backup now that is a defensive player of the year candidate level defender at the point of attack. We have not seen a lot of guards be able to defend the same way as Dyson Daniels has. Then you have the return of Jalen Johnson. You have Kristaps Porzingis still being able to play the 4 because you have Onyeka Okongwu as the 5-man. I do think it's a little bit interesting when you talk about the front court depth, and I've talked about that a lot on today's podcast when it comes to the Atlanta Hawks, because Kristaps and Onyeka kind of have the same vibe as Jared Allen, Evan Mobley. They would be the 4 and the 5 switching out, but you do have Muhammad to play in as the 5 if you need to have him grab some extra minutes on the floor as well. And of course, we don't even mention the bench. And I think that's where this gets interesting. When we talk about the Cavs depth, you have to also mention the Atlanta Hawks depth. The shooting of Luke Kennard, the defense of Nickeil Alexander-Walker, the defense and the shooting and the scoring acumen of Zachary Ricochet. And then, as you mentioned, the first round pick in Newell, who is a guy that could be in the rotation to start the season, depending on how he works. I just think the length, the speed, the shooting, and you add some guys who have added defense. And of course, Kristaps Porzingis is basically the Evan Mobley stopper. When we look back to last year, when guarded by Kristaps Porzingis, Evan Mobley, in around 8 minutes of matchup data, made just 3 of 12 field goals attempted, and for 25%, he was 0 of 4 from deep, and he was blocked. He had 4 turnovers, and Evan Mobley had just 7. So when we talk about matchups being null and void, when we talk about evening things out, Evan Mobley and Kristaps Porzingis, when they go head-to-head, they usually cancel each other out. And that can't happen when you talk about Evan Mobley being probably on this roster for the Cavs, the second most important player, if not the first most important player on the team. So I think when you have somebody, obviously, when healthy, if healthy, Kristaps Porzingis poses problems for Evan Mobley. Dyson Daniels and Jalen Johnson pose problems for Donovan Mitchell, Lonzo Ball, and Darius Garland. And then you have to look around the margins and see, are the Cleveland Cavaliers going to have trust in their bench unit, in their wing players, in their younger guys to step up in these moments? It's a big question mark for me. That's why I have the Atlanta Hawks as the most dangerous team for the Cavs to face in this coming season. Again, reiterating, if all are healthy, 1, 2, with this being everything that has happened in free agency and trades as of now. July 9th. Jimmy, before we get out of here, any final comments on our list or what you think about these teams and what you think about the Cavs heading into the 2025-2026 campaign?
I think the Cavs are in good shape against the backup wins against a lot of these teams in the regular season. Playoffs are their own beast. They have, in my opinion, still the most talented roster in the East. The last thing I'll say is that Trae Young shoots 40% career in the playoffs. That's all. I just don't think that guy's a winning player.
I know you have your vendetta against Trae Young and LaMelo Ball for their play styles in these things. I just think we've seen Trae Young perform in the playoffs. He had arguably one of the best postseason runs in basketball. And that obviously was a few years ago, but I think you have to have that in your pedigree. You have to have that in you to be able to bring it back out. It's not like it's foreign to him. Sure, overall, his numbers might be a little bit lackluster, but I think when you talk about someone who can perform in the late game scenarios, we have Jalen Brunson, you have Trae Young, you have Donovan Mitchell, all of these players who are capable of doing that and capable of stepping up when the lights are brightest. I think those are the kind of guys that you have to watch out for. But as Jimmy was mentioning, and I think it's so true, I think the Cavs are in a great standing, and we are making these rankings because we believe of how good the Cavs can be and what they need to do to overcome some of these teams. And it has been projected that the Cavs are going to be the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. They're projected to have the second best record in the NBA behind only the Oklahoma City Thunder. So this is not saying that we believe that the Cavs would lose these contests. It's just these are the teams that could pose the biggest threat to them as of now. The Cavs, as we know, have made some key acquisitions. They've made some key moves. They've made some smart moves, and they're still only growing under Kenny Atkinson and with this core group that is seemingly going to remain intact, Jimmy. So we'll have to keep waiting and watching to see how the summer pans out. But for now, that'll do it for today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.